Part 3 of Questions People Ask Me. This is a series that I started quite some time ago, dealing with questions I get asked all the time about blindness and visual impairment. And some of them are, from my point of view, ones that shouldn't need asking, and others, I guess, things that aren't so obvious after all. Anyway, I've already dealt with 10 of these questions, and so here's the next 5. The first of these is, do the blind or visually impaired actually care about their personal appearance? Well, some of us, yes, but I guess this question's a bit broad, almost so much so as to be meaningless. I mean, I know sighted people that don't give a shit about their personal appearance. And that said, I also know blind people who care a lot about their personal appearance, except if they're depressed, or if they're drunk, or if they're just sitting around in their lounge room. Generally, though, speaking, my experience says that a lot of people care about their personal appearance, whether they're disabled or otherwise, but that it really depends on circumstance, upbringing, and how much they have reasons to, engage with the community, and whether they get shown respect by other people, whether they have a good friend group around them, and so on and so forth. If they've not got much going on in their world, or they're kind of down, whatever, a lot of the time, then how they are groomed or dressed is probably not going to be high on their agenda. But if the question's trying to, establish that because we can't see what we're wearing, or whether our, basic grooming goes south, I care enough that I made sure to have a consistent outfit for these videos, that, I don't let myself look too scruffy in these videos, that I haven't just let myself balloon out to be the size of a house or anything else. I, know that I am a stage performer, and that I'm judged, whether I like it or not, by the people who see me perform. So, yeah, I care, and I know a lot of my blind and visually impaired friends do as well. Another question I got asked is, do the blind believe in God? Now, putting aside the obvious question of, well, which God do you mean? Allah, Yahweh, Jehovah, the flying spaghetti monster of Pasadena, whatever else. Are the blind capable of believing in the supernatural? Well, yeah, we are, just as much as everybody else. But is there any evidence that there is a higher than average percentile uptake of belief in such within the blind and visually impaired community? According to all the research I've done, no. We are as likely to believe as not to believe. So, there you go. I understand, though, why that question would be asked. It's far more, understandable than the next question, which I've been scratching my head over for some time, which somebody came up to me after a comedy gig and legitimately asked me, how do the blind have sex? Okay, so you're going to have to strap yourselves in here. It's a bit of a shock, but when two people love each other, look, I'm not going to take the piss too strong. Look, end of the day, the same way everybody else does. There is no differential. It doesn't need the ability to see in order to get everything to come together in the way it needs to. So I don't actually quite know if that person was trying to be funny, was slightly intoxicated, or genuinely just was confused. But there you go. As to whether we do, well, yeah, and parenting for a blind person, I'll address in another video. Are there any positive portrayals of the blind in the media? Well, yeah, there's a lot. There's nowhere near as many as there ought to be, and there's certainly not enough on reality television or in things like the news and documentaries and stuff. In fact, generally the rule of thumb is, you can use disabled people until such a time as they get to their life not being sunshine and roses or an epic tale of overcoming their disability, at which stage they just sort of vanish from your screens. Unless there's somebody like Stevie Wonder, in which case, as long as they're climbing up the charts, they'll be spoken about. As to things like Daredevil and Madam Web and other fictional type characters, yeah, there's lots of those, and there's lots that are actually genuinely convincing portrayals of what it's like to be blind and visually impaired. And I'll look at all of that in another video as well, because it's quite, it's a bit of a Pandora's box once you start looking into portrayals of the blind and visually impaired, and even more so the disabled in mass media. But there are positive portrayals, even if there aren't as many as there ought to be. The final question is one that's impossible for me to actually answer definitively because it's far too broad, and that is, what's the biggest obstacle facing the blind and visually impaired? That literally changes, I think, person to person, depending on circumstance. Some will tell you it's inability to get employment. Some will tell you it's discrimination. Some will say it's education. Some will say it's the NDIS or pensions. All of those things and so many more are daily, if not hourly, struggles and problems, and all deserve focus. And again, I will take this question on in its own video. But the fact is, there are things that we all have to tackle, and I'm glad that these types of questions are being asked, because it shows consideration and thought. So I hope this video helps. If it raises questions for you, please post them in the comments. If you've enjoyed this, like, share, subscribe, and please always look after yourself and everyone around you too.